May 1944. The Crimean Peninsula. The dust of the road tasted like chalk and dried blood. It was the taste of the retreat, though tonight, for Tatyana Volkova, it tasted like champagne. She sat in the passenger seat of the battered GZ67 Jeep, the wind whipping her dark hair escaping from under her medical cap. Beside her, gripping the steering wheel with hands that had strangled enemy sentries, sat Major Oleg Grimov. "Stop smiling," Oleg shouted over the roar of the engine and the wind. "You'll swallow a bug." "I can't help it," Tatyana laughed. She touched the pocket of her tunic. Inside, wrapped in a piece of gauze, was a simple silver ring. Tomorrow at the regimental headquarters, amidst the chaos of the front, they would sign the papers. Tatyana, the 24-year-old field surgeon with eyes as gray as the Black Sea, would become the wife of the GRU intelligence officer. "We're almost at the checkpoint," Oleg said, his voice softening. He glanced at her. His face, scarred and usually grim, was open, vulnerable. "Tanya, after this war, I promise you, a house, a garden, no more blood, just you and me. Just drive, Major," she teased, resting her hand on his shoulder. The road ahead dipped into a ravine known as the Wolf's Gut. It was a blind spot, a dead zone between the retreating German 17th Army and the advancing Soviets. It was pitch black. Oleg switched on the headlights. The beams cut through the swirling dust. Then they stopped. A truck was parked sideways across the narrow road. It had no markings, no lights, just a dark, rusted hulk of steel blocking the way. Oleg's instincts kicked in instantly. He slammed on the brakes, the Jeep skidding to a halt 20 meters away. His hand flew to the TT pistol at his belt. "Get down," he hissed. "Oleg, I said get down." Before Tatyana could move, the night exploded. Floodlights from the top of the truck blinded them. Men emerged from the darkness of the ravine walls. Not Soviet soldiers, not regular Wehrmacht. They wore a mix of uniforms. Tattered field gray, stripped of insignia, wild and ragged. Deserters, a Strafbattalion unit lost in the chaos, or perhaps something worse. A pack of wolves cut off from their army, answering to no law but their own hunger. "Out! Out!" A voice screamed in German. Oleg fired. 2 shots shattered the silence. 1 shadow fell, but there were too many. A rifle butt smashed into Oleg's face. He was dragged from the Jeep, kicking and fighting like a lion. Tatyana reached for the medical bag, useless, before rough hands grabbed her hair and yanked her onto the gravel. She saw 7 of them, 7 silhouettes against the blinding headlights. "Look at this," the leader said. He was a giant of a man, bald, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of raw meat. He walked over to Oleg, who was being held down by 3 men. The leader looked at Tatyana. He smiled. It was a smile that Tatyana would see every time she closed her eyes for the rest of her life. "A doctor," the leader noted, seeing her insignia. "And a spy." He pointed at Oleg's shoulder boards. "A perfect wedding." The basement. The world shrank to the size of a damp, moldy cellar in an abandoned farmhouse a few kilometers off the road. They threw them in like sacks of grain. Oleg was barely conscious. His face was a mask of blood. Tatyana crawled to him, her hands shaking, checking his pulse. "Tanya," he wheezed. "Run." "Hush," she whispered, tears streaming down her dirty face. "I'm here." The door opened. They entered. 7 of them. They brought a lantern, a bottle of schnapps, and a cruelty that went beyond war. This wasn't about strategy. This wasn't about the Reich. This was about power. The leader, the giant, sat on a crate. He took a swig of the bottle. "My name is Kruger," he said, his voice thick and oily. "Oberst Kruger. You should know the name of the man who owns you." He gestured to his men. "We are bored, little doctor. The war is ending. We are losing. But tonight we win." What followed was a blur of agony and darkness. They made Oleg watch. They beat him every time he screamed, every time he tried to lunge at them with his broken body. Tatyana disassociated. She floated above her own body. She was a surgeon. She knew anatomy. She knew exactly what was happening, physiologically. Contusions, lacerations, shock. She tried to turn her mind into cold steel, to analyze the pain rather than feel it. But she couldn't block out the sound, the laughter, the smell of sweat, alcohol and blood, and the faces. She forced herself to look, not to plead but to memorize. 1. Kruger, the giant, a scar running through his left eyebrow. 2. The sadist, thin rat-like features. He had a gold tooth. He laughed like a hyena. 3. The silent one, heavy-set, dead eyes. He smoked a pipe while he watched. 4. The young one, barely 20. He looked terrified, but he joined in. Peer pressure turned to bloodlust. 5. The one with the burn. Half his face was pink scar tissue. 6. The ginger. Red hair, pale skin, freckles. He hummed a tune. 7. The mechanic. His hands were covered in grease. He had a tattoo of a spider on his neck. For days. They kept them for 4 days. On the 4th night, they grew tired of the game. The front line was moving closer. They could hear the Soviet artillery rumbling in the distance like approaching thunder. "Time to go," Kruger announced. He walked over to Oleg. Oleg was tied to a chair, barely breathing. One eye was swollen shut, but with his remaining eye, he looked at Tatiana. "I love you," he mouthed. No sound came out. Kruger pulled out a Luger pistol. "How touching," Kruger said. He placed the barrel against Oleg's forehead. Tatiana screamed. It was a sound that tore her throat lining. Bang! Oleg's head snapped back. The man she was supposed to marry, the future she was supposed to have, ceased to exist. Kruger turned to Tatiana. She was huddled in the corner, broken, naked, covered in bruises and filth. "And you," Kruger sighed, "you are used up." He didn't shoot her. That would be a mercy. "Throw her in the ravine," he ordered the mechanic. "Let the wolves finish her." The resurrection. Darkness. Cold. The smell of dry earth and sagebrush. Tatiana woke up. She didn't know if she was alive or dead. Pain was the only reality. It radiated from every inch of her skin, from her broken ribs, from the hollow emptiness inside her. She opened her eyes. Stars. Millions of cold, indifferent stars spinning above her. She was lying at the bottom of a limestone ravine. Her body was half buried in loose rocks. The mechanic had tossed her down like garbage, assuming the fall would kill her. It hadn't. She tried to move. A scream locked in her throat. Her left leg was shattered. Her arm hung uselessly at her side. "Die," a voice whispered in her head. "Just close your eyes. Oleg is waiting. It's warm there. It's quiet." She closed her eyes. The darkness was inviting. But then she saw it. The image burned onto her retina. Kruger's smile. The gold tooth of the sadist. The spider tattoo. If she died, they won. They would go home. They would disappear. They would live long lives, bounce grandchildren on their knees, and forget the girl and the major they broke in a Crimean basement. Rage started as a spark, hot and agonizing. It burned through the despair. It wasn't the rage of a soldier. It was the rage of a force of nature. Tatiana Volkova, the healer, died in that ravine. Something else began to crawl out. She dragged herself. In. Her fingernails tore off as she clawed at the limestone. She drank muddy water from a puddle. She ate beetles. She splinted her own leg with a branch and strips of her ruined uniform, screaming silently into the dirt as she set the bone. It took her 3 days to crawl out of the ravine. A Soviet patrol found her on the side of the road, half dead, delirious, clutching a small, dirty object in her hand. It was a school notebook. She had found it in the rubble of the farmhouse where they had been held. It had belonged to some child who lived there before the war. The patrol medic tried to take it from her. She snarled at him like a wild animal. Inside, written in charcoal and dried blood, were 7 descriptions. 7 crosses.
1945 Berlin.
The ghost. The war ended. Flags waved. People danced in the streets. The world wanted to heal, but Tatiana did not want to heal. She had recovered physically. The limp was slight, barely noticeable. Her beauty had returned, but it was colder now, sharp and brittle like ice. She worked at a military hospital in occupied Berlin, treating the wounded, silently watching the prisoners of war. She was looking for faces. Every night, she returned to her small apartment in the Soviet sector. She sat at a table with a single candle and the notebook. She had used her position. She had accessed intelligence files. Oleg had taught her well. She knew how to listen, how to bribe, how to disappear. She found out that Kruger's unit was a specialized sabotage group. Sonderkommando Wolf. They had scattered after the Crimea, but rats always returned to the sewer. The first name, November 1945. A smoky cabaret in the British sector of Berlin. Music played, jazz, loud and chaotic. The air smelled of cheap tobacco and desperation. Sitting at the bar was a man. He was thinner now, wearing civilian clothes, trying to look like a refugee. But Tatiana recognized the ears. The way he held his cigarette. Number 6. The ginger. The one who hummed. His name was Hans Weber. Tatiana sat next to him. She wore a red dress she had bought on the black market. Her lips were painted crimson. "You look lonely," she said in flawless German. Hans turned. He saw a beautiful woman. He didn't see the doctor from the basement. Why would he? To him, she was just meat, long dead and forgotten.
"I am," Hans smiled.
It was a weak, pathetic smile. "Are you looking for company?" "I am looking for a mechanic," she lied. "My car. It has trouble. I am good with my hands." Hans grinned, looking at her chest. "Show me," she whispered. She led him out. Not to a car, but into the ruins of a bombed-out cathedral nearby. The shadows were long and deep. "Where are we going?" Hans asked, stumbling slightly from the alcohol. "Ideally, hell," Tatiana said. Her voice changed. It dropped an octave. It became the voice of the ravine. Hans stopped. He looked at her. For the first time, he really looked at her eyes. Gray, cold, dead. Recognition flickered in his eyes. A spark of absolute terror. "You," he whispered. "The Crimea. The doctor."
"Hello, Hans."
He tried to run. Tatiana was faster. She didn't use a gun. A gun was too quick, too impersonal. She used a scalpel. She moved with the precision of a surgeon. A single swipe across the hamstring.
Hans collapsed, screaming.
She stood over him. The rubble of the cathedral rose around them like the walls of that basement. "Do you remember the song you hummed?" she asked softly. "Hum it for me. Please," he begged, crawling backwards. "I was just following orders. Kruger." "It was Kruger." "I know," she said. "I'll get to him. But you sang while my husband died." She knelt down. She went to work. Not to save, but to dismantle. She left him there in the ruins. On his forehead, she used her lipstick to draw a single cross. Back in her apartment, Tatiana opened the notebook. She took a pen. She looked at the entry, 6. The ginger. She drew a thick, black line through it. 1 down, 6 to go. She packed her bag. The next name, according to the whispers she had heard from Hans before the end, was in Argentina. The hunt had begun. 1948.
Buenos Aires, Argentina.
The war was over in Europe, but in South America, the Third Reich was enjoying a second life. Under the protection of Juan Perón, thousands of Nazis had flooded into Argentina via the Ratlins, trading their gray uniforms for linen suits, their Lugers for cocktails, and their atrocities for comfortable silence. Tatiana Volkova had ceased to exist. In her place was Maria Vladi, a French-Russian widow with a heavy veil and a heavier suitcase. She moved through the humid, bustling streets of the La Boca district like a shadow. She wasn't looking for a general. She was looking for a grease monkey. Target number 2. The mechanic, the spider. The intel from Berlin had been good. The mechanic, Corporal Fritz Harel, was working at a dockyard repair shop. He was useful here, Engines didn't care about war crimes. Tatiana found the shop on a rainy Tuesday. It smelled of diesel, sea salt, and ozone. She stood across the street, watching through the window of a cafe, stirring a cold coffee. She saw him. He was older, thicker around the waist. He wore blue overalls covered in oil stains. But the tattoo was there, a black spider web on his neck, peeking out from the collar. He was laughing with a coworker, wiping his hands on a rag, those same hands that had tied Oleg to the chair. Tatiana waited until nightfall. The shop closed. The workers left. Harel stayed behind to finish a job on a heavy truck. He was greedy. He wanted the overtime. Tatiana picked the lock of the side door. It was child's play. The lock was primitive compared to the safe boxes she had learned to crack in Berlin. She slipped inside. The shop was a cathedral of shadows and hanging chains. Harel was under the truck, lying on a creeper dolly, wrenching a bolt. He was humming a tango tune. Tatiana walked silently across the concrete floor. She picked up a heavy pneumatic impact wrench. She kicked the creeper. Harel slid out from under the truck, startled. "Hey, we're closed, you." He stopped. He saw the woman standing over him. She wore a mechanic's jumpsuit she had stolen from the locker room. Her hair was tied back. He squinted. "Who are you?" "I'm the inspection," Tatiana said in German. Harel froze. The accent. It wasn't Argentine. It was Eastern. "Do you remember the ravine, Fritz?" she asked softly. His eyes widened. He scrambled backward, trying to get to his feet, but his legs were tangled in the creeper. "The wolves didn't eat me," Tatiana said. "They spat me out." Harel grabbed a wrench and swung it. Tatiana sidestepped with fluid, practiced ease. She wasn't just a doctor anymore. She was a predator who had spent 4 years honing her body into a weapon. She caught his wrist. She twisted it, snap, dislocating the radius. Harel screamed. She kicked him in the chest, sending him sliding back under the truck. "No, please." His voice echoed from beneath the chassis. "I just drove the truck. I didn't touch you. It was Kruger. Talk to Kruger." "You watched," Tatiana said coldly. "And you laughed." She walked to the hydraulic lift controls. The massive truck was suspended on jacks, hovering just inches above Harel's chest. "You like machines, Fritz," she said, placing her hand on the release lever. "Let's see how this one works." "Wait, I have money. Gold. I can give you names." "I have the names," she said. She pulled the lever. The hydraulics hissed, a sound like a dying snake. The truck dropped. Not fast, but with the unstoppable weight of gravity. Crunch. It wasn't a loud noise, just a wet thud. Tatiana didn't look. She walked to the office, washed her hands with industrial soap, and walked out into the rain. In her notebook, back at her boarding house, she drew a line through number 7. The mechanic. 2 down. 5 to go. 1950. The jungle of Misiones. The trail led north, deep into the jungle borderlands between Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. This was the true heart of darkness, where the most paranoid fugitives hid. Tatiana had tracked 2 of them here. They stuck together like parasites. Target number 3 and number 4. The sadist, Goldtooth, and the Burn. Their names were Gunther Rahl, the sadist, and Karl Weigel, the Burn. They had bought a small yerba mate plantation. They lived like feudal lords, surrounded by armed guards and fierce dogs. Tatiana couldn't just walk in. This required surgery. She spent 2 months in the nearest village. She posed as a botanist studying local flora. She learned the patrol routes. She learned that Rahl loved morphine, a habit he picked up during the war, and Weigel loved local women. She infiltrated the compound not as a killer, but as a supply delivery. She hid in the back of a truck bringing grain. It was a sweltering night. The air was thick with mosquitoes. Tatiana moved through the high grass toward the main house. She carried a silenced Nagant revolver and a medical kit. She found Weigel first. The man with half a face of burn scars was sitting on the porch, cleaning a shotgun. He was drunk. Tatiana emerged from the shadows. Before he could raise the shotgun, she fired. But The bullet took him in the throat. He gurgled, clutching his neck, unable to scream. Tatiana stepped onto the porch. She looked into his eyes as the light faded from them. "Fire burns, Carl," she whispered. "But ice burns longer." She stepped over his body and entered the house. Raul was in the bedroom. He was high, lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan. The gold tooth glinted in the dim light. He didn't hear her enter. He only realized someone was there when he felt the cold metal of a stethoscope on his chest. "Heart rate is elevated," a voice said. Raul blinked, trying to focus. He saw a woman in white. A hallucination? An angel? Who? "Do you remember the basement, Gunther?" Tatiana asked. She was preparing a syringe. "You like to play doctor with me. You like to see how much pain a human body could take before it broke." Raul's eyes cleared. Panic set in. He tried to reach for the pistol on the nightstand. Tatiana stabbed the syringe into his neck. It wasn't poison. It was a high dose of a paralytic agent she had stolen from a hospital in Buenos Aires. Curare derivative. Raul froze. His muscles locked up. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. But he could see. And he could feel. Tatiana sat on the edge of the bed. She opened her medical kit. She took out a pair of dental pliers. "You took everything from me," she said conversationally. "My dignity, my love, my life. So, I will take something from you." She leaned in, open wide. She spent an hour with him. She didn't kill him quickly. She explained in clinical detail every procedure she was performing. She stripped him of his pride, layer by layer. When she finally left the plantation, the house was silent. Weigel was dead on the porch. Raul was dead in the bed, his mouth a ruin of blood, the gold tooth missing. Tatiana walked into the jungle. She stopped by a river. She threw the gold tooth into the muddy water. She didn't want a trophy. She wanted erasure.
1952, São Paulo, Brasil.
The years were blurring. Tatiana was 32 now. Her hair was showing streaks of premature gray. Her hands were always cold. She was tired. The rage that had fueled her in the ravine was burning low, leaving behind only ash and duty. Target number 5, the young one. His name was Eric. He had been a boy in the basement. 19. He had been terrified of Kruger, terrified of the war. But he had joined in. He had held Oleg's legs while they beat him. Tatiana found him in a favela in São Paulo. He wasn't living like a king. He was living in squalor. He was a priest. Father Eric. He ran a small mission for orphans. He looked skeletal, haunted. Tatiana sat in the back of his wooden church. She watched him preach forgiveness. She watched him wash the feet of street children. She waited until the church was empty. She walked up the aisle. Her footsteps echoed on the wood. Eric turned from the altar. He saw her. He didn't gasp. He didn't run. He looked at her face, and he collapsed to his knees. He began to weep. "I knew you would come," he sobbed. "I see your face every night. In the bread. In the wine. In the eyes of the children." Tatiana stood over him. Her hand was in her purse, gripping the gun. "Stand up," she commanded. "No," Eric wept. "Kill me here. Before God. I deserve it. I have tried to wash the blood off, but it won't come off." He tore open his cassock, exposing his chest. "Shoot me, please. Send me to hell." Tatiana looked at him. This wasn't the monster she had hunted. This was a broken vessel, tortured by his own conscience for 8 years. She pulled the gun out. She aimed it at his head. Eric closed his eyes.
"I'm sorry."
"I'm so sorry." Tatiana's finger tightened on the trigger. She remembered Oleg. She remembered the ravine. But she also remembered her oath.
Primum non nocere.
First, do no harm. She realized that killing him was a mercy he was begging for. And she wasn't in the business of mercy. "No." Tatiana lowered the gun. Eric opened his eyes, confused. "Death is too easy for you, Eric," she said quietly. "You want me to end your suffering. I won't do it." She leaned close to him. "You will live," she hissed. You will live every day knowing that I am out there. You will look at every shadow and wonder if it's me. You will carry the weight of what you did until you rot from the inside out. That is your penance." She turned and walked away. Behind her, Eric screamed, a sound of pure despair. He wanted the release of death. She had denied him. In her notebook, she didn't cross his name out. She put a question mark next to it. Living death. 1954. The intelligence. 5 targets dealt with. 1 left alive in purgatory. 1 dead in Berlin. 3 dead in South America. That left 2. Target number 6. The silent one. Target number 7. Kruger. The giant. The trail had gone cold. The silent one, a brute named Hansel, had vanished. And Kruger? Kruger was a ghost. Tatiana was running out of money. She was running out of strength. She was in Rio de Janeiro, working as a nurse in a charity clinic to make ends meet. One evening, a patient came in. An old German man, delirious with malaria. Tatiana treated him. In his fever, he babbled. He talked about the organization. He talked about the castle in the Alps. He talked about General Kruger. Tatiana leaned in close. "Where is Kruger?" she whispered in German. The old man blinked. He went back. Home. The Americans. They need him. For the new army. Tatiana felt a chill go down her spine. West Germany. The Cold War was in full swing. The Americans and British were rebuilding the West German Army Bundeswehr to fight the Soviets. They were recruiting experienced officers. They were forgiving past sins in the name of future utility. Kruger hadn't just escaped. He had been promoted. He was back in Europe. He was respectable. He was protected by the CIA and the West German government. Tatiana looked at her reflection in the clinic window. South America was a knife fight in the mud. Europe would be a chess game. She packed her bag. She took the notebook. The hunt was going home. Winter 1955. Munich, West Germany. The economic miracle was in full swing. Munich had risen from the ashes. There were new Mercedes sedans on the streets, neon signs buzzing in the windows, and the smell of roasted chestnuts and expensive cigars in the air. Tatiana walked through the Christmas market on Marienplatz. She pulled her fur collar tight against the biting wind. She was 35 now, but her eyes were ancient. She was no longer Maria Vladi from Argentina. Now, she was Herta Weiss, a private nurse specializing in geriatric care for the wealthy. She stopped at a newsstand. The headline on the Frankfurter Allgemeine caught her eye. General Helmut Kruger appointed as advisor to the Ministry of Defense. There he was. The photo showed a distinguished older man in a tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne. He had gained weight. His hair was silver. He looked like a grandfather, a statesman, a pillar of the new democracy. But Tatiana saw the scar through the left eyebrow. She saw the meat-carved face. He was untouchable. He lived in a fortress of respectability, guarded by the new German police and his American handlers. But every fortress has a back door. Target number 6. The silent one, the gatekeeper. Tatiana knew she couldn't get to Kruger directly. She needed a key. She found the key in a dive bar near the train station. His name was Hansel, the silent one. In the Crimea, he had smoked a pipe and watched while his comrades destroyed her. He never spoke. He just watched. Now he was Kruger's personal driver and bodyguard. A loyal dog until the end. Tatiana followed him for 3 days. She learned his routine. Every Friday night, after dropping the general off at his estate in the Bavarian Alps, Hansel went to a small hunting cabin in the foothills to drink alone. The cabin. Tatiana waited inside the cabin. She sat in the dark. The smell of pine and damp would reminding her of the ravine. Hansel entered, stomping the snow off his boots. He reached for the light switch. "Don't," Tatiana said from the shadows. Hansel froze. He was a professional. His hand went instantly to the holster under his jacket. "Who is there?" he growled. It was the first time she had ever heard his voice. It was gravelly, ugly. "A ghost," she said. She struck a match. The flame illuminated her face. Hansel squinted. I don't know you. Look closer. He looked. He saw the gray eyes. And then the color drained from his face. The doctor, he whispered. We thought. Kruger said you were dead.
Krüger litt.
Hansel drew his gun. Tatiana shot him first. Not to kill. She fired a small caliber round into his kneecap. Hansel roared and collapsed. Tatiana walked over and kicked the gun away. She sat on a chair opposite him, watching him writhe. You like silence, Hansel, she said. So let's be quiet. She didn't torture him for long. She didn't need to. She just needed the security codes for the estate, the patrol schedules, the layout of the house. He talked. He talked because he saw in her eyes that she wasn't looking for justice. She was looking for an ending. Kruger is alone this weekend, Hansel gasped, clutching his shattered knee. His wife is in Paris. The staff is off. Just the perimeter guards. Good, Tatiana said. She stood up. Wait, Hansel begged. I didn't touch you. I just watched. And that, Tatiana said, placing the muzzle of her suppressor against his forehead, is why you die. But she crossed name number 6 off the list. Now there was only one, the wolf's lair. The estate sat on a cliff overlooking Lake Starnberg. It was a Bavarian palace, surrounded by high fences and snow-covered pines. It was snowing heavily, a blizzard that turned the world white. Perfect cover. Tatiana wore white camouflage over her clothes. She carried a medical bag and Hansel's pistol. She moved through the forest like a phantom. She bypassed the perimeter fence using the blind spot Hansel had revealed. She avoided the guard dogs by throwing meat laced with sedatives. She reached the main house. It was warm, glowing with golden light. Through the French windows she could see a library. A fire was roaring in the hearth. And there he was.
Helmut Krüger.
The Oberst. The general. The monster. He was sitting in a leather armchair, reading a book. A glass of cognac sat on the table. He looked peaceful. Tatiana felt a surge of adrenaline so strong it almost knocked her over. 10 years. 10 years of hunting. 10 years of nightmares. She opened the terrace door. It was unlocked. Hansel was supposed to lock it. She stepped inside. The wind blew snow onto the Persian rug. Kruger looked up, annoyed by the draft. Hansel? Close the damn door. It's freezing. He stopped. He saw a woman standing in the center of his library. She was wet, shivering, her hair plastered to her skull. She held a gun loosely at her side. Kruger didn't panic. He was a general. He had faced firing squads and artillery barrages. You are not Hansel, Kruger said calmly. He closed his book. A thief. No, Tatiana said. She walked closer. She stepped into the light of the fire. I am a memory. Kruger studied her face. He frowned. He looked at her limp, the slight drag of the left leg. And then he smiled. That same terrible smile. The smile from the basement. Ah, Kruger said softly. The little surgeon. The Crimea, 1944. I thought the wolves had eaten you. They tried, Tatiana said. They choked. Kruger chuckled. He took a sip of his cognac. He didn't seem afraid. He seemed amused. You have come a long way, doctor.
Argentina? Brazil.
I heard rumors, accidents, disappearances, my men dying one by one. They are all dead, Kruger, she said. You are the last. And what now? Kruger asked. You shoot me? You go to prison? I am a very important man, my dear. The Americans need me. The Chancellor needs me. He stood up. He was huge, looming over her. You are nothing, he sneered. A piece of refuse from the war. A broken doll. You think you can judge me? I did what was necessary. I survived. That is the only morality in war. He took a step toward her. He underestimated her. He saw a woman. He didn't see the predator. My husband, Tatiana said. Her voice was trembling, not with fear, but with the effort of holding back the scream. His name was Oleg Gromov. Kruger waved a hand dismissively. I don't remember names, only victories. That was the sentence. Tatiana raised the gun. Kruger lunged. For an old man, he was fast. He knocked the gun from her hand. It skittered across the floor. He grabbed her throat. His massive hands squeezed. "I should have crushed your skull myself," he snarled, pressing her down onto the desk. Tatiana couldn't breathe. Black spots danced in her vision. But she didn't panic. She had planned for this. She knew he was stronger. She was counting on it. She reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out a knife. She pulled out a syringe. She jammed it into his neck, right into the jugular. Kruger gasped. He let go of her throat, swatting at his neck like a bear stung by a bee. "What?" He staggered back. "Succinylcholine," Tatiana rasped, massaging her bruised throat. "A muscle relaxant, used for intubation." Kruger tried to speak, but his tongue felt thick. His legs gave way. He crashed to the floor, knocking over the table and the cognac. "It paralyzes the skeletal muscles," Tatiana explained, standing over him. "But it doesn't affect the brain. Or the pain receptors." Kruger lay on the rug. He couldn't move his arms. He couldn't move his legs. He could only blink and breathe shallowly. His eyes were wide with a terror he had never known. Helplessness. Tatiana picked up her medical bag. She opened it. She took out a scalpel. "You broke me," she whispered. "You broke my bones. You broke my life. But you made a mistake, Kruger." She knelt beside him. She leaned close to his ear. "You left me my hands. The procedure." She didn't kill him then. She dragged his paralyzed body out onto the terrace. The snow was falling harder now. The temperature was dropping. -10 degrees. She stripped him of his tuxedo jacket. She stripped him of his shirt. She left him lying in the snow, paralyzed, half naked. "In the ravine," Tatiana said, standing over him. "I was cold for 3 days. I couldn't move. I watched the stars and I prayed for death." She crouched down. "I won't cut you, Kruger. I won't lower myself to your level of butchery." She took out the notebook, the tattered, blood-stained school notebook she had carried for 10 years. She held it up so he could see. 7 names, she said. 6 crosses. She took a pen. She drew a large, black X over the name Kruger. She tore the page out. She crumpled it and shoved it into his mouth. "Eat your victory," she whispered. She stood up. "The drug will wear off in 20 minutes, she said. "Just enough time for the hypothermia to set in. You will feel the cold, Kruger. You will feel your heart slowing down. You will feel the darkness coming. And you will be unable to lift a finger to stop it." She looked at him one last time. "Oleg says hello." She turned and walked away into the white void of the forest. Behind her, General Helmut Kruger, the Wolf of Crimea, lay alone in the snow, staring at the indifferent stars, waiting to freeze. The end of the line. Tatiana walked for miles. She didn't feel the cold. She reached a small bridge over a rushing, icy river. She stopped. She took the notebook, the rest of it, and threw it into the water. It swirled in the black current and vanished. She took the silver ring from her pocket. The ring Oleg had given her. She put it on her finger. "It's done," she whispered to the wind. She didn't commit suicide. That would be a waste of the life she had fought so hard to keep. She walked to the train station. She bought a ticket to Zurich, then to Paris, then to London. Epilogue. The Ghost Doctor. Years passed. The death of General Kruger was ruled a tragic accident. "Heart failure while enjoying the winter air," the paper said. No one looked too closely. In a small village in Cornwall, England, there lived an old woman named Mrs. Gray. She was a quiet woman. She grew roses. She volunteered at the local hospice. She was famous in the village for one thing, her hands. She had the steadiest hands anyone had ever seen. She could stitch a wound so perfectly it wouldn't leave a scar. She could set a bird's broken wing with a touch. She never talked about the past. She never married. Sometimes, on cold winter nights, she would sit by her fireplace with a glass of tea. She would look into the flames and smile. A small, cold smile. She wasn't afraid of the dark anymore, because she knew what hid in the dark. and she knew that the monsters were afraid of her. When she died in 1998, they found a small locket around her neck. Inside was a faded photograph of a Soviet major with a kind smile. And on the back of the photo, written in a steady hand, "Paid in full." The end.